It has been a wild, wild day in D.C., and all the drama could actually bring us closer to the end of pot prohibition. Pot stocks getting a big boost this morning after a number of big political wins at the polls last night in various states. And then one of pot's biggest enemies, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, resigning today. That turbocharged the group. Aditi Roy's in San Francisco with the whole story. Aditi.
Hi, Melissa. What a day. There were some key wins yesterday, but the biggest boon for the cannabis industry came with the announcement of Jeff Sessions' departure today. The stock impact was immediate. Tilray shares ended up 30.6%, the best day it's had since mid-September. Canopy growth up 8%, Aurora up 9%, Cronos up 8%. Sessions was a key roadblock for the marijuana industry. Shortly after California legalized recreational marijuana at the beginning of this year, Sessions rescinded the Cole memo. That was the Obama-era rule that essentially left states alone when they legalized marijuana. Canaccord Genuity analyst Bobby Burleson telling us, in terms of impact, it depends on his replacement, but in general, it should be interpreted as a positive, considering Sessions' staunch opposition to marijuana legalization. The Sessions' departure comes after some key wins for the industry in the midterms as well. Voters in Michigan approving the legalization of recreational marijuana, Utah and Missouri passing ballot initiatives for medical marijuana. Tilray CEO Brendan Kennedy spoke to CNBC today before the Sessions resignation. He talked about the midterms.
People are waiting for the Berlin Wall of cannabis prohibition to topple over in the U.S. And I think yesterday's election removed a few more bricks from that wall. I think that we'll see other countries around the world maybe take the lead over the next few months.
And back in this country, another major move last night. Texas Congressman Pete Sessions losing his re-election bid. He's blocked dozens of cannabis bills. His loss could help push marijuana legislation through Congress. So, Melissa, we started with one Sessions, ending on another.
Aditi, thank you. Aditi Roy in San Francisco. Well, Tim Seymour, who's long a number of names, sits on advisory boards for 3 cannabis stocks, says the pot industry has actually scored even more victories in the last day than you might think. Our very own cannabis king, Tim, is over at the Plasma to break it down. Tim.
Hello, Mel. So, right, the state of cannabis, as we can see, this is the map yesterday or 2 days ago. Here's the map now. We just added a couple more dark greens and one light green. Dark green being medical, light green being full recreational. In fact, remember, Michigan, by the way, politically turned blue last night, and then it turned green because cannabis effectively in the form of full recreational is alive and well. And there's a lot of things going on the basis of what the fallout was. Saying it's the end of prohibition to me is a little aggressive, but there's no question that Brothers Sessions, and they aren't blood brothers, but they are certainly brothers from a different mother, and that they were both very much against the cannabis trade. Aditi talked about both Pete Sessions, head of the House Rules Committee, has been blocking all kinds of legislation from the floor. Former Attorney General Sessions was certainly critical of the Cole memo, had been out of his way to enforce the rule of law. Bottom line is, let the states do their job. The States Act is coming. I think there's very good news. And then the other part of last night was really the pro-cannabis governors. And when I think about that, it's not just Pritzker in Illinois, which certainly brings the Midwest, I think, one of the strongest backers of full legal cannabis, but obviously Cuomo, and then, around us in the tri-state area, you have Connecticut and New Jersey that are about to fall. Ultimately, you get to a place where people are starting to look to the East Coast as being certainly a place that will begin to challenge the West Coast. Remember, the West Coast states have not only flipped legally and kind of legislatively, but certainly mentally and socially. The West Coast has been the center and the capital of this country in terms of cannabis. The argument right now is that the East Coast, West Coast rappers feud may be beginning in cannabis. In other words, there's a lot of folks that the East Coast could be a bigger market, can argue that it's a very different market, that consumption and density will be much more powerful here. Once New York goes, you can bet New Jersey and Connecticut will go. In fact, New Jersey is arguably ahead of New York, but I bet New York's not going to let that happen. So let's watch this. But again, a very, very important time. I don't think prohibition goes away. I think a lot of the companies in the business don't want it to go away overnight, but it's happening.
Steve.
Tim, so Canopy and Cronos, two of the names of which I'm long, took a hit. Canopy took a hit, a 47% hit. Cronos took a 57% hit. Isn't this more about what their actual revenues are and how much you're paying for growth? All this legality seems like a great tailwind, but we still have the revenue issue. Do you agree?
It's not even just revenue, Steve. I mean, it's valuations, and it's ultimately the size of the markets. And so we've talked about this. The Canadian integrated companies were first to market. I think the biggest argument against what's been going on with the Canadian names, remember, the entire sector is probably up 20 to 40% in the last 5 sessions alone. So they've taken a lot of that back. That's good news. But think of all the U.S. companies that are coming to market: Curaleaf, MedMen, Acreage is coming next week. You've got Harvest coming next week. These are big companies, and I think people are looking at valuations just very differently. They're also looking at services and ancillary businesses. They're looking at technology. They're looking at processing. So it's not just one way to play the sector. And I think those big companies that were based just on production or funded capacity have to be rethought in some way.
At the same time, Tim, I mean, if there is a move to federally legalize marijuana, let's even just say for medical use, and you can transport across state lines, which has really been the bottleneck for the industry in terms of achieving scale of production or anything like that, won't that endanger the smaller players and really tip the hand to the larger ones?
Well, right now, actually, the fact that the interstate issues are I think they're actually protecting smaller business. I think they're keeping them.
Right.
They're allowing companies in particular states to dominate an individual state, get some critical mass. We're seeing that in Florida with True Leave or other companies that I think are able to win in this environment. I think the States Act is coming. And I talked about, I think you didn't need last night's House take by the Democrats to actually have the States Act be a very real and nearer term event for the cannabis industry than people think. I actually think that's the best news out there.